The arena's newest attraction. The metallic arena stretched before her like a twisted amphitheater of nightmares. Thousands of alien beings filled the curved seating, their forms so varied and strange that her human mind struggled to process them all. Some had multiple eyes that blinked in sequence, others possessed limbs that bent in impossible directions, and a few seemed to be nothing more than shifting masses of luminescent gas contained within translucent shells. She stood at the center of it all, a small figure clutching an alien-forged blade that felt heavy and foreign in her trembling hands. At barely 13 years old by Earth standards, she appeared fragile and out of place among the technological marvels surrounding her. But the scars crisscrossing her pale arms told a different story, one of survival in the face of unimaginable horror. The crowd's attention focused on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. They leaned forward in their seats, mandibles clicking with anticipation, gills fluttering with excitement. To them, she was nothing more than an exotic curiosity, a human, they called her, though most had never seen one before. She was Subject 41A, a designation that had replaced her real name so long ago she could barely remember what her parents had called her. For 2 years, she had lived in the bowels of their ships, kept in a cage barely large enough for her to stand upright. Scientists and officials would occasionally drag her out to study her reactions, poking and prodding her like a laboratory specimen. They documented how she flinched from pain, how tears formed in her eyes, how she recoiled from their touch. To them, these were merely interesting biological responses from a primitive creature. But today was different. Today, they had brought her here to die. A deep, mechanical rumble echoed through the arena as massive gates on the opposite side began to slide open. The crowd's chatter died to a whisper of anticipation. Through the widening gap emerged something that made her heart race with recognition and terror, a tiger, but unlike any that had ever walked Earth's surface. Its coat rippled between deep crimson and charcoal black, the colors shifting like liquid fire in the arena's harsh lighting. Orange eyes burned with an unnatural intensity, and fangs curved from its mouth like polished daggers. Each muscle beneath its alien-enhanced hide spoke of power that could tear through steel, let alone fragile human flesh. The beast padded into the arena with predatory grace, its massive paws silent against the metal flooring. It surveyed its surroundings with intelligence that went beyond animal instinct, then fixed its burning gaze upon her. A low growl rumbled from its throat, a sound so deep it seemed to vibrate through her bones. The girl tightened her grip on the sword, feeling the cold metal bite into her palms. Around them, the alien crowd erupted into excited chatter, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones. She didn't need to understand their languages to know what they were saying, they were placing bets on how quickly she would die. An official rose from the highest tier of seating, his form draped in shimmering robes that seemed to be woven from liquid starlight. When he spoke, his voice carried across the arena through hidden amplifiers, cold and emotionless as winter wind. Though she couldn't understand the words, their meaning was clear: let the entertainment begin. The tiger crouched low, its hindquarters rising as every muscle in its enhanced body coiled like a spring. Its tail lashed back and forth with increasing speed, and she could see the calculation in its glowing eyes as it measured the distance between them. Time seemed to slow as predator and prey faced each other across the metal floor. The girl's breathing steadied despite her terror, her body falling into a combat stance she had learned through brutal necessity. She had survived 2 years of captivity, countless experiments, and the deaths of other prisoners who hadn't been strong enough or lucky enough to endure. She wasn't going to die today. Not for their entertainment. The tiger's muscles bunched, and she knew the moment of truth had arrived. First blood. The tiger exploded into motion, its powerful form launching across the arena floor with devastating speed. The girl's instincts, honed by months of fighting for survival, kicked in before her mind could process the threat. She threw herself to the side, rolling across the gritty metal surface as massive claws whistled through the air where she had been standing. The crowd erupted in laughter, a sound that chilled her more than any alien growl. They found her desperate scrambling amusing, her obvious terror entertaining. To them, this wasn't a fight, it was a brief comedy before the inevitable bloody conclusion. The tiger landed gracefully and spun to face her, its enhanced reflexes allowing it to recover from the missed strike almost instantly. Its orange eyes burned with frustrated hunger, and saliva dripped from its curved fangs onto the arena floor with audible drops. She scrambled to her feet, sword raised defensively, trying to put as much distance as possible between herself and the predator. But the arena walls offered no escape, and the beast was already moving again, circling her with patient, calculated steps. "Come on," she whispered to herself, a habit developed during long nights in her cage. "Think. What do you know about tigers?" Her mind raced through half-remembered nature documentaries from her childhood, fragments of a life that felt like someone else's memories. Tigers were ambush predators. They relied on power and surprise. But this one was different, enhanced, intelligent, clearly bred or modified for arena combat. The beast feinted left, then right, testing her reactions. Each movement was fluid and controlled, designed to wear down her defenses and find an opening. The crowd's chatter grew more excited as they anticipated the kill. When the tiger struck again, she was ready. Instead of dodging away, she stepped forward and to the side, bringing her blade up in a desperate parry. Metal met claw with a shower of sparks and a screech that echoed through the arena. The impact sent shockwaves up her arm, nearly jarring the weapon from her grasp. But something unexpected happened, the tiger recoiled with a snarl of pain. Dark, oily blood welled from a gash across its massive paw where her blade had found its mark. The arena fell silent. For a moment that stretched like eternity, predator and prey stared at each other across the blood-stained floor. The tiger's eyes held something new, not just hunger, but genuine surprise. It had expected easy prey, not resistance. The girl felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in years, hope. Not the naive hope of escape or rescue, but the grim satisfaction of proving she could fight back. She had drawn first blood against a creature designed to kill her. The crowd's silence shattered into confused murmurs. She could sense the shift in their mood without understanding their words. The entertainment wasn't going according to script. The tiger began circling again, but its approach was different now, more cautious, respectful of the small creature that had managed to wound it. Blood continued to drip from its paw, leaving a trail of dark spots on the metal floor. She kept her sword raised, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Her arm ached from the impact, and she could feel exhaustion creeping into her muscles. The initial rush of adrenaline was fading, replaced by the cold reality of her situation. She had wounded the beast, but it was far from defeated. The tiger seemed to sense her weakening resolve. It stopped circling and crouched low, every muscle coiled for another strike. This time, there would be no testing, no cautious approach. It had learned to respect her blade, but it was still a predator, and she was still prey. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation, their earlier amusement replaced by genuine interest. They were beginning to realize that this small human might provide better entertainment than they had expected. The girl adjusted her grip on the sword, her knuckles white with tension. She had proven she could wound the beast, but could she survive its next attack? The tiger's burning eyes held hers across the arena floor, and she saw her own determination reflected in their alien depths. Both fighters understood that the real battle was just beginning. The dance of survival. The tiger's second attack came with calculated fury. Gone was the casual confidence of a predator toying with helpless prey, now it fought with the focused intensity of a creature that had learned to respect its opponent's blade. The girl met its charge not with desperate flight, but with careful footwork. She had spent countless hours in her cell mentally rehearsing every fight she had witnessed, analyzing the patterns of predators and the mistakes of their victims. Now those bitter lessons served her well. She ducked under a swipe that would have taken her head clean off, pivoted on her heel, and slashed at the tiger's flank. The blade scored another shallow cut before the beast spun away from her reach. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, this was becoming an actual fight, not the execution they had expected. For the next several minutes, girl and tiger engaged in a deadly dance across the arena floor. The beast's enhanced strength and speed were undeniable, but she had advantages of her own: human intelligence, adaptability, and the desperate cunning that comes from having nothing left to lose. Each exchange taught her something new about her opponent. The tiger favored its right paw for striking, compensating unconsciously for the wound on its left. Its enhanced muscles generated tremendous power but required brief recovery periods between major attacks. Most importantly, it fought on instinct, following patterns bred into its enhanced genetics. But she was growing tired. Sweat stung her eyes and her breathing came in ragged gasps. The sword felt heavier with each parry, and her movements were becoming sluggish. The tiger, despite its wounds, showed no signs of fatigue. Its alien enhancements apparently included increased endurance. The crowd sensed the shift in momentum. Their excited chatter took on an expectant tone as they anticipated the human's collapse. Some began making new wagers on exactly how many more minutes she could last. The tiger pressed its advantage, launching a series of rapid attacks that pushed her steadily toward the arena wall. She managed to deflect or dodge each strike, but barely, and she could feel her strength ebbing with every desperate movement. When her back finally touched the cold metal barrier, she knew she was out of options. The tiger crouched barely 10 feet away, orange eyes burning with triumph. It had cornered its prey at last. But as the beast prepared for its final pounce, the girl made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Instead of cowering against the wall in defeat, she smiled. The expression was so unexpected, so incongruous with her desperate situation, that the tiger actually hesitated. In that moment of confusion, she pushed off from the wall and sprinted directly toward her surprised opponent. The crowd gasped in collective shock. Was the human attempting suicide? At the last possible second, she dropped into a slide, passing beneath the tiger's startled leap and rolling to safety behind it. As she came up, she reversed her grip on the sword and drove it backward in a move she had seen gladiators use against larger opponents. The blade punched through the tiger's hide just below its ribcage, finding the gap in bone and muscle where its enhanced heart beat furiously. The beast's triumphant roar became a gurgling cry of agony as she twisted the weapon deeper. For a moment, predator and prey remained locked together, the tiger standing on shaking legs with the girl crouched beneath it, both their hands on the sword's grip, one trying to drive it deeper, the other trying to pull it free. Then the tiger's strength failed. It collapsed sideways with a final, shuddering breath, its orange eyes dimming as life fled from its enhanced form. The arena fell into stunned silence once again, but this time the quiet held a different quality. It wasn't the brief pause of surprised entertainment, it was the profound hush of beings witnessing something they hadn't thought possible. The girl staggered away from the tiger's corpse, her entire body shaking with exhaustion and shock. She had done it. Against all odds, she had killed the beast. But as she looked up at the sea of alien faces staring down at her, she realized that her victory might have created a new kind of problem. She was no longer just an amusing curiosity or a helpless victim. She had become something far more dangerous in their eyes, a threat. The price of victory. The silence stretched until one of the arena officials rose from his elevated seat. He was a towering figure draped in robes that seemed to shift between silver and deep purple, his face hidden behind a mask of polished metal. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power, echoing through hidden speakers embedded in the arena walls. Though she couldn't understand his words, the tone was unmistakable: surprise, calculation, and something that might have been respect. The official gestured toward her with one elongated limb, and the crowd began to respond with a mixture of sounds that suggested heated discussion. She stood over the tiger's still form, chest heaving as she tried to process what had just happened. The alien sword felt impossibly heavy in her grip, its blade slick with the beast's dark blood. Around her, the arena floor told the story of their battle: scorch marks from claws on metal, droplets of blood from both combatants, and deep gouges where desperate strikes had missed their intended targets. The official raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent once more. He spoke again, his words carrying a ceremonial weight that transcended language barriers. She had won this round, she realized. But what did victory mean in a place like this? Her question was answered when the arena gates slid open with mechanical precision. A squad of guards emerged, moving in perfect synchronization despite their wildly different physiologies. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. A few seemed to glide rather than walk, their forms shifting like controlled smoke. They surrounded her carefully, maintaining a respectful distance that hadn't been present during her previous encounters with them. Before, they had grabbed and dragged her with casual indifference. Now they treated her like something that might bite back. One of the guards, a creature with multiple arms and skin like polished obsidian, gestured for her to drop the sword. When she hesitated, unsure if compliance meant death, it repeated the gesture more firmly but without aggression. It was a request, not a demand. She let the weapon fall to the arena floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the vast space. The guards closed in then, but their handling was different from before. They guided rather than forced, escorted rather than dragged. As they led her toward the exit, she caught fragments of conversation from the crowd. While she couldn't understand the words, the emotional undertones were clear enough: excitement, speculation, and an undercurrent of unease. She had disrupted their expectations, and they weren't sure what to make of it. The corridors beneath the arena were a maze of metal and strange lighting that cast everything in shades of blue and green. Her escorts moved through the passages with practiced efficiency, their various forms of locomotion creating an odd symphony of sounds: footsteps, clicking claws, and the whisper of bodies that moved without touching the ground. But instead of returning to her familiar cell, they led her deeper into the complex than she had ever been. The walls here were cleaner, the lighting brighter, and the air carried scents she couldn't identify but that suggested this was a place of greater importance. They stopped before a door that looked no different from dozens of others, except that it bore symbols she had never seen before. One of the guards operated some kind of control panel, and the door slid open to reveal not a cell, but a room. It was still clearly a prison. The walls were the same metal, and there were no windows or obvious means of escape. But it was larger than her previous cage, with an actual bed instead of a bare floor, and what appeared to be basic washing facilities. There was even a small table with what looked like food. The guards ushered her inside, and she noticed that they remained outside when the door sealed shut. She was alone, but the quality of her confinement had changed dramatically. She moved cautiously to the table and examined the food. It was nothing like the nutrient paste she had been given before. This looked like actual prepared meals, though composed of ingredients she didn't recognize. The portions were generous, almost luxurious compared to her usual starvation-level rations. As she ate, her mind raced with implications. They weren't punishing her for winning, they were rewarding her. But why? What did they want from her now that they knew she could fight? The answer came the next day when the guards returned. But this time, they weren't alone. Behind them walked a figure she had seen before from the arena's upper tiers, one of the officials who managed the gladiatorial games. He studied her with eyes that held intelligence and calculation. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Though she couldn't understand the words, his meaning gradually became clear through gesture and tone. She had proven herself capable of providing genuine entertainment. She had shown that humans could be more than mere victims, they could be gladiators. And in a galaxy where alien audiences had grown bored with predictable outcomes, a small human who could kill enhanced predators represented something incredibly valuable. They weren't going to let her die anymore. They were going to make her famous. The realization hit her like a blow to the stomach. Her victory hadn't earned her freedom or even better treatment out of mercy. It had made her too valuable to waste. She was going to fight again, and again, until something in the arena finally proved stronger than her will to survive. But as the official finished speaking and turned to leave, she straightened her shoulders and met his alien gaze with defiant eyes. If they wanted a gladiator, she would give them one. And maybe, in the process, she would find a way to turn their own entertainment against them. After all, she had already done the impossible once. The gladiator's choice. Months passed in her new existence. The arena became as familiar as her cell had once been, though infinitely more dangerous. She fought creatures pulled from nightmares, beasts with scales like armor, predators that could phase through solid matter, and once, memorably, a plant-like entity that tried to digest her alive. Each victory brought better quarters, better food, and better weapons. The aliens had learned that a well-maintained gladiator put on better shows than a half-starved victim. Her new sword was perfectly balanced, forged from metals that held an edge sharper than anything Earth had ever produced. But it also brought something else, fame. The crowds that gathered to watch her fights grew larger with each appearance. She began to recognize faces in the stands, alien dignitaries who traveled from distant worlds specifically to see the human gladiator in action. Merchants sold trinkets bearing crude representations of her likeness. Children of various species mimicked her fighting stance in the arena's corridors. She had become exactly what the officials had intended, a star attraction. What they hadn't anticipated was how this would change her relationship with the other gladiators. The arena complex housed dozens of fighters from across the galaxy, each kept in carefully controlled isolation. But fame had its privileges, and she gradually gained access to areas previously forbidden to her. She met others like herself, prisoners forced to fight for alien entertainment. There was Kethril, a reptilian warrior whose entire species had been enslaved when their homeworld was conquered. Zara, a being of living crystal who had been captured while defending her people's sacred sites. Dozens of others, each with their own story of loss and survival. For the first time since her capture, she wasn't alone. The revelation that changed everything came from an unexpected source, an elderly maintenance worker whose species resembled walking trees. He had been observing the gladiators for decades, and his branches rustled with barely contained excitement when he approached her one day. The arena, he whispered in heavily accented but understandable English, is not just entertainment. It is a testing ground. He explained that the alien empire used gladiatorial combat to identify the most dangerous warriors among their subject species. The greatest fighters were eventually recruited into the empire's military forces, their skills turned toward conquering new worlds and enslaving new populations. She was being groomed not just for entertainment, but for service as a weapon of conquest. The knowledge burned in her chest like acid. Every victory, every moment of defiant pride, had brought her closer to becoming the very thing that had destroyed her own world and family. They weren't just stealing her life, they were planning to use her against others who shared her fate. That night, she lay on her improved bed staring at the metal ceiling, wrestling with an impossible choice. She could continue fighting, growing stronger and more skilled, until they deemed her ready for military service. Or she could refuse, choosing death over complicity in the Empire's expansion. But as she considered her options, a third possibility began to take shape in her mind. It was insane, suicidal, and had virtually no chance of success. But it was also the only choice that offered any hope of true freedom. She would not just escape, she would break the entire system. Over the following weeks, she began to carefully sound out the other gladiators. Many were too broken by years of captivity to consider rebellion. Others were too afraid of the consequences. But some, like Kethril and Zara, still carried the spark of defiance that had made them dangerous enough to capture in the first place. The plan they developed was elegantly simple. During the arena's grandest tournament, when the most important officials and the largest crowds were present, they would turn their weapons against their captors instead of each other. It would be a slaughter, the guards would cut them down within minutes. But those minutes would be broadcast across the galaxy, showing every enslaved species that resistance was possible. The night before the tournament, she stood at her cell's small window, looking out at the stars scattered across the alien sky. Somewhere among those points of light was Earth, or what remained of it. She wondered if anyone there remembered her, if her parents had ever learned what happened to their daughter. Tomorrow, she would either die as a slave or die as a free woman. But she would not live as a weapon turned against the innocent. The arena doors opened for the final time, and she walked through them with her head held high. Around her, the other gladiators moved with the same grim determination. They had all made their choice. The crowd roared its approval as the tournament began, unaware that they were about to witness something unprecedented in the arena's history. The officials in their elevated seats leaned forward in anticipation of the spectacular battles to come. Instead, they watched as every gladiator in the arena turned as one toward the stands and raised their weapons in salute, not to honor their captors, but to bid farewell to the enslaved who would remember this moment. The girl who had once been subject 41A looked up at the alien faces that had found such entertainment in her suffering, and smiled. Today, she would give them a show they would never forget. As the first gladiator charged toward the arena wall, beginning their final, futile assault on the guards, she whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening among the distant stars. Not for victory, that was impossible. But for the courage to die as herself, rather than as their creation. The arena erupted into chaos as weapons clashed not with beast and gladiator, but with oppressor and oppressed. The sound of battle rose to the stars, carrying with it a message that would echo across the galaxy. We remember who we are. We choose how we die. And we will never stop fighting. The end.